In metaphysics, my philosophy, objectivism, holds that there is only one reality, not two, nor four, nor 10.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Reality. Today we're asking if curing aging is a smart use of resources. To start this discussion, we want to put a context to our words and define all of our terms. So when we talk about curing aging, that actually isn't the best way to think of what the discussion will be about. We want to think about how to overcome aging. The difference of using the word overcoming here is because you can get around any issue or illness in your life in terms of overcoming. It can either be a cure, which removes the obstacle, or you can circumvent the obstacle by going around it. There's different ways to think about obstacles and how we overcome them. So overcoming aging is a modern problem that we're starting to figure out as a society. When we think about aging, we want to think about organisms and how they gradually decay over time. So aging would include plants and animals. All living things age in some way or another. So overcoming it would be, in a sense, trying to seek immortality from natural deaths. So how would we go about overcoming aging? Our focus here is man-made changes. There's three categories I'd like to think of when thinking about aging and overcoming aging. There are cryogenics, which is halting your biological processes in order to preserve your body until medicine can provide better treatment for aging. Then there are prosthetics, which would be replacing any body part that has decayed from aging. That could even include parts of the brain. Another type of overcoming aging is pharmacology. A pharmacological way of overcoming aging would be manipulating the metabolism or hormones or neurotransmitters in your body in order to artificially improve or medically improve one's condition. So a pharmacological change would be strictly a cure, while prosthetics would be a way of circumventing aging by removing the thing that's aging. With those categories in mind, we want to exclude overcoming the sense of existential acceptance of your fate, or an existential acceptance that everything is destined to die at some point or another. With this context in mind, the main question William and I are asking is if overcoming aging is an effective use of resources. We want to focus on here asking a question like, if I had $1 million, what kind of scientific research do I want to support? What kind of research do I want to contribute to or push to go faster than other scientific endeavors? So you might have many things you want to put resources towards, but the focus here is scientific-based endeavors. As I was saying before, overcoming aging can be distinguished into three different categories as cryogenics, prosthetics, or pharmacology. Of course, this isn't any official distinction, but these are distinctions that help us frame our discussion. We can eliminate cryogenics from the discussion because ultimately that wouldn't be overcoming aging. It's just a process used until aging is overcome. We're focusing on the ultimate goal here, that is overcoming aging completely. So it's not even a thing you have to worry about anymore. So prosthetics and pharmacology will be our focus. Questions you might wonder about with prosthetics is, if you replace something about your brain, would that necessarily change your mind and therefore make you into something other than what you are? That in a way you're programming just a new simulated person without actually being yourself. So if that's where overcoming aging is in terms of prosthetics, you might not want that because you actually your aging wouldn't be overcome, you'd be effectively dead. So is that true or not? Regarding questions of pharmacology and overcoming aging with drugs and medical treatments directly, we might ask if ultimately these sort of changes can overcome biological limits that cause aging. There could be some theoretical limit of how long biological cells last. And if there is such a limit, even conceptually or philosophically, it would be a waste of resources to pursue that objective. So the overall picture we're trying to paint here is whether and why and if you should care about aging research.
Thank you, Lev, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is William. And before we launch into the discussion here, I want to mention our change in format. In the previous two episodes, we did a back and forth with prepared speeches that we gave and recorded ourselves. And this time around, we're going to try a middle segment where we just talk to each other on the phone. We're hoping to get a more natural interaction and push each other during the conversational dialogue. Do you have something to add, Lev?
I think it sounds great. I'm excited for this new format, and I like the more natural discussion. We'll have some more interesting ideas, I think.
Great.
So to get on track with the overcoming aging discussion, you had brought up to me a study about rats and a study with overcoming aging, a medical pharmacological treatment on rats. Can you remind me about that?
Yes. So this was a study done a couple years ago. I think the main doctor on it, his last name was Kirkland, and we can put a link to the study in the description of the video. Basically, what they did is they wanted to test some drugs on aging mice to see the effects of the drugs. So they would radiate the mice and cause premature aging to resemble like older mice. And they would create these senescent cells, which are the cells that are damaged but won't die. And so they start to cause damage around neighboring cells. And then they would give the mice these senolytic drugs. There was a combination of two different substances, and I don't remember the exact names of them, but it was this drug cocktail they'd give them. And the drugs would, in essence, kill the senescent cells and would improve the health of the mice. And so what they found is that with certain dosages of this drug, the mice would live about 36% longer than the average mice without the drug. Yeah. So it did seem to produce some positive effects.
Thinking about that, it sounds like the quintessential example of aging research. We do have to start on mice at some level, even if humans are our goal. It's hard to have even the resources to study humans until you're ready after studying some basic research, as they call it, with rats, just to get the basic science down. I'm thinking, though, and that could be viable research because it doesn't necessarily cost a lot or consume a lot of time if it's not with people, but should that be extended to people, do you think? Should that same type of research be extended to people, do you think, William?
I think that's their goal eventually. They probably want to start testing on higher animals. You probably get the chimpanzees or monkeys or whatever and see how it works on them. But one of the problems they're having, is that you have to cause illness in the person to
True.
perform this particular experiment. So they would have to start experiment in humans. They would have to experiment on people who are already ill, who are already old and deteriorating.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine there's a lot of, moral, political hurdles they've got to get over in order to get to that stage of testing.
I'm thinking though that all research is that way, and it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, we have to put our resources towards something, whether it's the government doing that, whether it's yourself doing that, regardless of the political economy you have, there's a way to spend resources on these things. In a capitalist society, you would especially have to decide as an individual what you want to support directly. And we can still do that today even. There's plenty of charitable donations you can have, and regardless of the state of the politics today, you can still do that. So I'm thinking about, to what extent should we devote more and more money into that area?
I think it's a good use of money to find cures for things like deteriorating cells. I mean, that's obviously a benefit for your lifespan. So I would agree that in general, that's a very good use of money. This was with the mice. This was, I believe, a government-sponsored experiment. So I would, put the money more towards private experiments if they're available and support the private health companies. But, most of the research is done by government. So what are you going to do?
I would put a harder position on that to say that it's objectively better to spend more money on aging research and overcoming aging research than any other medical topic or any scientific topic even, more than, say, going to Mars, more than, say, curing cancer, or maybe even advancing AI technology. I would think that's the most important thing to put time and scientific energy towards.
Yeah, I think that's probably true in America, where we are so healthy and most of us live so long that now we're focused on how do we live longer. But I do think that there's a contextual question. So, like, say someone who lives in Africa, and if they're in a country where people are just starving all around them, then they would want to put their money into fixing their society first.
What do you mean fixing society first? I mean, couldn't
So, like, improving jobs or improving the water supply or whatever's wrong with their society, whatever's causing, a low lifespan, like maybe they're dying at 40 and because of diseases that haven't been resolved in their area, like malaria or whatever they have. Like if they have mosquito infestation, then they want to put money towards improving pesticides or whatever the situation might be that's causing the real problem, more immediate problems they're having with their society.
I think you would have a point maybe with pharmacological treatments, because it depends entirely on if the treatment you're considering only works after, like, you're 70 years old. But I can't imagine a lot of aging research wouldn't directly apply to any age and wouldn't actually itself help to cure malaria or make malaria less of an issue. Because if it's less of an issue, then you will live longer, of course, and then develop more cures and better cures. And
yeah, I mean, in general, it's all really like keeping you alive longer, right? So
yeah,
but not all of it is directly aimed at causing or solving the deteriorating problem. Sometimes it's solving just a trash problem. If you've got trash and rats all around, that's not good.
maybe a better way to put that is that I don't think it would actually cost many resources to solve sociological issues. I think those sociological issues cost less resources to solve anyway. It shouldn't cost a lot to solve some food issues. Not that you shouldn't do any research there. I mean, life has many aspects to it, and we can't ignore one thing completely in favor of another. But I think as far as resources, it certainly costs a lot more to study drugs and their long-term effects and not beyond looking into the biological effects of it. And people know a lot about farming as it is, and sure there's research there, but it should be more cost effective there. But if we
Maybe, sorry.
You go ahead.
Maybe this will help because I had another idea. Societies go through a kind of development, a hierarchy of knowledge throughout history. You got to discover medicine before you can discover drugs that'll help you and all this other stuff. I don't know. There's like a hierarchy of knowledge that will get you more and more technological developments. So the West is at the stage where we're worrying about life extension because we've already developed a strong medical base and biological base of knowledge where we can get to that point.
Yeah, that's the entire world. It doesn't matter where you are. The human species is at that level. It doesn't matter. That hierarchy of knowledge is there. That's developmental.
But that's not
the state of things now.
That's where the humanity is not just one nation. I mean, there's different cultures, different nations. I'm saying in the West, we've gotten to that point. In the East, not so much. And in the Middle East, like really not so much. And then in Africa, it's even worse. So you have certain nations, certain cultures that haven't gotten to that point yet. They're barely getting to the industrial age.
It's not like they have a separate knowledge base, though. They have the same amount of knowledge and ability to know things as we all do. So it doesn't really matter what culture they're from. They still have the knowledge. It's still acquirable. They don't have. There's not knowledges plural. There's not like
what I'm saying is
American knowledge and African knowledge.
I'm saying they'll have to. They don't have that knowledge. They don't have the scientists to do that stuff there. They have to buy it from us.
Would you blame? But would you say that's even resource intensive, though? I could imagine solutions to those things aren't resource intensive. The resource intensive things, like the West can spend its money on that because that's where the economic power is. You can spend that, but anybody in Africa certainly could solve their own farming problems with a little help. And it's not like they don't have phones. They can call us here.
Well, even farming problems, there's a lot of technology that goes into figuring out how to make your farm more productive. I mean, I'm saying that there's a certain scientific level of scientific knowledge you need in order to develop and produce products that will help you. And not every society has reached the level that the West has, especially in America. So I'm saying that context drives your choices and where to put your funding for research.
Mm-hmm. Although I would push back to say that the research we want more of is this improvement of quality of life and aging, because that puts a context into life lasting long enough that we can solve more major problems. That sure, it might be in maybe some limited context, a particular country might spend its resources because it's in a better position to study farming than it is to study aging research. But if you have the resources, all things being equal, they absolutely should spend it on aging. That's what I would say. I mean, would you say, at least in the context of the US, would you say that aging research is objectively better than any other topic? Or would you still say it depends?
Well, yeah, because objectivity depends on the person, depends on who is seeking the good. You know, whatever research you're doing has to be good for the person who needs it. So if you're going to die because a rat's going to bite you tomorrow, or you're likely to be bitten by mosquitoes and die of malaria, then you want to put your research in that area. But if, you're not even worried about living to 200 or 300 years old. You're worried about living to 40. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I do agree that in the West, we have the context where we don't really, not a whole lot of us have to worry about dying from malaria or whatever. That's like the example that's stuck in my head right now. But we can focus on other problems, more advanced problems. We have the first world problems. In the third world, they've got their own set of problems.
It would still seem better that you study to overcome aging, that just say, well, let's focus more on the neuroprosthetics I had been talking about. And that's the way of overcoming aging that could apply to any context and would necessarily help anybody in any place, whether you're in Africa or the US, whether you're in Nigeria or the Congo or Saudi Arabia.
I don't know much about neuroprosthetics. Maybe you could give me a 30-second breakdown.
Well, there have been studies where, well, I shouldn't even say studies, there have been actual case examples of a microchip being implanted in someone's brain surgically, and then that implant can connect directly to a computer. And with their thoughts, they can use machine learning to train the computer to read certain brain waves as a signal to move an arm in a certain direction. So, that's the level it's at now, where you can control something with your mind, and that otherwise damage with your brain or spinal cord or whatever else in your neurological system, it can be overcome through prosthetics. That can include damage caused by aging, such as, well, stroke is often related to aging. So it can overcome stroke damage in direct ways, just the effects, or even later on, it could theoretically be applied to like enhancing memory, like as an enhancement to your brain, like as an added level of capacity and functioning that you would have normally. And you would overcome aging in that sense by expanding what would decay naturally by replacing it with artificial elements.
Yeah. I've heard of that microchip in the brain thing. Yeah, that seems like a very good use of research. That it's obviously very beneficial to a lot of people.
Yeah, like I could see the example of malaria being much more important to someone in, say, Brazil or Africa, where, Brazil is generally more medically advanced than many places in Africa, but I know mosquitoes have been a concern there. And that might be more concern in their situation or in a particular town, even because people in that town might be more susceptible to malaria than they are to just dying of old age, statistically. But with neural prosthetics, that's not something if you want to enhance your memory, that applies to everybody. If you want to, if that kind of thing, when you think about overcoming aging, that's like cybernetics in a way, that you're adding on to the human body that isn't there naturally.
Well, that kind of leads into one of my main concerns about life extension is also increasing mental health span. So you want to also make sure you don't suffer from dementia, because one of the problems of getting older is most people over 100 have dementia. So it's very hard to live a long time and not have some sort of memory loss or mental breakdown, deterioration. So if we can use the neuroprosthetics to find some solution to dementia that's not caused by other like diseases, but just basically cellular breakdown or whatever's going on, memory loss, whatever's causing that, hopefully that can be solved by prosthetics.
That's the sort of thing I think is just objectively better to study over, say, going to Mars. Well, I want to add a little more context to this. Is there any research that you think is more valuable than aging research? Is there something that if you had $1 million, where would you put your money towards?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of selfish about this. I'm more focused on um, solving the debate between free will and determinism.
Hmm.
So I would put research into philosophical research regarding epistemological issues, specifically free will, volition, that kind of research. And that might involve um, cognitive science. Um, so I know there's a lot of research into the just the physical uh, functioning of the brain and how that relates to the mind. So I would be looking in that area of scientific research.
Hmm. That I understand that point of view. Do you think it's more fundamental than the studying with medical research or the condition of the human body?
I see them as basically compatible because one is body, like you're dealing with physical ailments, deteriorating body, deteriorating brain, and so you obviously you need your body healthy, but you also need your mind healthy. And I think for humans that means you have to maintain free will, you have to understand how to use free will. Like if part of dementia, if part of that problem is that people don't really understand choice making, and so they make the wrong choices. And if you make the wrong choices over 100 years, maybe your brain can't take that, and it just starts breaking down because you've made too many wrong choices. So if that's part of the problem, I think studying free will and choice making goes hand in hand with the aging research.
Hmm. Well, I guess to put a more finer point on what I'm saying is that yeah, I like that sound of that, but if I had a choice, and I mean, science is very part of my life. I just got a master's degree in psychology, so I'm not just speaking as a layperson here, but a person professionally interested in science and devoting my research to the mind. I I see the value in free will research from a neuroscience perspective or a psychology perspective, but I would still put more money if I had the choice. If I had my own money, if I had $1 million, I would put it in neuroprosthetics, particularly for like Neuralink, which is a company that Elon Musk made recently, which is brain computer interfaces slash neuroprosthetics. Because I think they'll have not only benefits for aging research, but also just cognitive enhancement and cognitive ability, and even quality of life would all be improved with that. So my focus for research isn't that there's one objective, but that by pursuing one objective, I can see many branches that are more valuable to me than the branches I see with free will research.
Okay, I'll bring up one other issue with neuroprosthetics. I think uh, there's going to be some aging involved in that, right? Because
Right.
prosthetics will deteriorate. It's not as if we're solving or overcoming aging. We're replacing one kind of aging with another kind of aging. So we're replacing the natural aging of our organic system with the aging of our artificial prosthetic system. So once we cure or overcome the natural deterioration and we figure that out, then we're going to be faced with the problem of how do we solve the artificial deterioration,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to have to keep replacing our brain parts and our body parts. And one concern with that is if you completely replace the organic system with an artificial system, are you still human?
Yeah, I see that objection. I'm sure there's so much more we could say about this, but I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground here, covered a lot of context with aging research. So I would hope that anybody in our audience would comment on our discussion or have anything to add that we may have forgotten. I'd be very interested to hear what people have to say. Do you have anything to add, William?
No, I think that was great. I think we covered a lot of points. And yeah, I'll be looking forward to comments. And in a minute, I'll just wrap this up with my conclusion.
Thanks. Hope to have another episode for you guys next week.
I believe there's an important conceptual issue regarding aging research or overcoming aging, and that is with the concept of aging itself. Aging, the way we're discussing it, means deteriorating. But normally, when you think of aging, it doesn't mean deteriorating. It just means getting older, time passing. And that doesn't necessarily mean deteriorating, because young children can grow older and become stronger and not deteriorate. And they can become healthy and better and flourish. But then older people, after a certain point in time of their lifespan, they start to deteriorate. And there's a lot of theories on why, but I think one of the main reasons why is because over time you absorb more radiation from your environment and your cells just naturally start to break down. So I wanted to just clarify my view of aging, and if we're going to talk about research into overcoming aging, I think we should clarify that we're talking about curing diseases or solving the problem with deteriorating cells, anything that shortens your lifespan. Also, I would like to entertain the question of what if we actually do overcome the aging problem? And if that happens, what would the consequences be? I think the consequences would depend on how we overcome aging. For example, if we use prosthetic parts, then that would cause different consequences than if we were to use drugs or pharmacological solutions. So if we were to start using or relying fully on prosthetic parts, we would become part human, part machine, or part fake man. And ultimately that would lead to becoming a machine. And I don't think that should be the purpose of research into overcoming aging. I don't think the goal should be to transition to a machine. I think the goal should be to heal the human and improve his lifespan, not replace him with robotic existence or artificial existence. So that is my view on the consequences of using prosthetics. If we were to rely on pharmacological solutions, then I think this would be a much better way to go, because we would be getting rid of the problem with the cells or getting rid of diseases, and we would be maintaining the integrity of the human organism. Also, I think there might be an effect on our place in evolution. I think that if we were to start relying at an early age, specifically start relying on prosthetics or drugs in order to make it to the reproductive age, then that would have an effect on evolution, because then you'd be having the unfit for nature kinds of humans reproducing. And I don't think that's a sustainable course of action. I think that we should at least wait until we've reproduced, we've made it to the reproductive age, to start worrying about extending our lifespan. Otherwise, we're just going down the path of becoming machines or relying on machines for our existence. That's all I have to say on aging. Next week, we will be discussing Buddhism, specifically the question of, is meditating good for you? Is there any benefit to meditating, or is there any benefit to anything else in Buddhism? So broadly, we'll talk about any aspect of Buddhism that can be useful to an atheist or to an objectivist, to someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural elements of it. Okay, so that's it for today, and I look forward to your comments. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for watching this episode of Welcome to Reality. Please join us next time for another discussion where we apply philosophical ideas to moral and political action. To support the show, please share our content and consider becoming a sponsor. You'll find a link to our Patreon page in the description of this video.
Wow.